Good day, grade 12s. In this video, I will be going through some financial mathematics, specifically the question 6 from the June 2022 paper, and then as well as the financial mathematics from the term test that we wrote. Now, once again, if we take a look at our mark allocations, financial growth and decay financials normally count about 15 marks out of the 150 for paper 1. So it doesn't count a lot, but it can be one of those places, like with number patterns, where you can score a few easy marks that can help build up your pass mark and even get you closer to that 80 or 90. So the first question we'll be taking a look at is from the June 2022 exam paper, question 6.1 specifically, and it asks you, for how long must 50,000 Rand be invested so that it can double if the interest rate is 8.5% per annum? On straight line method. So whenever you hear straight line method, you need to think simple interest. Now give your answer in years and months. So that means we need to give them a very precise time span. So we know that in this case, we are going to have a beginning amount of 50,000, and this must then be doubled to 100,000. So our end amount is going to be 100,000, and our interest rate is just going to be 8.5%. So 8.5 over 100, which would give me 0.085. Now remember, we only use these decimals or change it to decimals if it's going to give me a simple, easy to work with decimal. And then n is what we want to calculate. Now the formula for simple interest is A equals to P times 1 plus IN. We know that the A value is 100,000. We know that the P value is 50,000. And then we know that I is 0.085 times N. So in this case, to solve for N, we're going to have to start by getting rid of the 50,000. That's multiplying with the bracket. So the simplest way would be in this case to divide on both sides with 50,000. So then we would have 2 equals to 1 plus 0.085 N. And now we can solve for N. We throw the 1 over, it becomes a negative. So then 2 minus 1 gives me 1 equals to 0.085 N. We divide on both sides with the 0.085. And we get that N is going to be 11.76470588. Now, the 11 in this case tells me we need 11 years, definitely. The decimal part, on the other hand, tells me that we need something extra. We need a few more months or a few more days for this amount to double. In this case, we're going to have to take it, and then after years comes months. So we're going to take the decimal part and we multiply it with 12, and that's going to tell me how many extra months I need. So that's going to give me 9.1764705 months. So from this we can see we're just going to need a little bit more than 9 months. So we're going to round up to 10 months because we need more than 9 months for this amount to actually double. Therefore, we are going to have to save this money for 11 years and 10 months. Then the next question asks you, okay, a cell phone valued at 24,000 depreciates at 18% per annum on the reducing balance method. Determine the value of the cell phone after 3 years. So we have the 24,000, that's going to be the original value of the phone. So that's going to be my P value in this case. 18% per annum, that tells me my interest rate is 18 over 100, which in decimals would give me 0.18. Now remember, we only swap it to decimals if it gives us a simple, easy decimal to work with in this case. Then we know that our time span is 3 years, and they want us to calculate how much this cell phone is worth after 3 years. So they want us to calculate the A value. Now, since they're talking about reducing balance method, that means we are doing or working with compound interest or depreciation in this case. So that means we are going to use the formula A equals to P1 minus I to the power of N. Now we know the P value in this case, that would be the 24,000. We multiply that with 1 minus I in this case would be 0.18 to the power of 3. And if we type that into our calculator, we will get that the phone will be worth 13,232 Rand and 83 cents. So this phone was worth 24,000 when this person bought it, but after 3 years, it's only valued at 13,232 Rand 83 cents. Okay, so the next question is a bit of a timeline situation. Now they ask us that X Rand is invested into account at the interest rate of 12% per annum compounded monthly, and then 3 years later 2X Rand is deposited into the same account. Now after 7 years, there is a total amount of 276,558 Rand and 75 cents in the account, and then they want you to determine the value of X. So how much money was initially invested? So in this case, we kind of have two timelines. This first X Rand was invested for a total of 7 years. So whatever this X amount was, got interest for 7 years. And this was interest or invested at 12% per annum compounded monthly. Meaning every month they got a bit of the interest. Then the second amount that was added, this was the 2X part, was only invested for 4 years because it got paid into 3 years after the original X amount was invested. So that was also invested at 12% per annum monthly compounded. Now if we take these two values and add them together, we should get the 2X or the 276,558.75. So we could say, okay, in this case, our final amount should be equal to the interest. Okay, and they said compounded monthly, so it's compounded interest for the first for X. Okay, so the how much interest and the value of the first X value that was added, and then the interest gained by the second payment, the 2X. Now if we can fill in all this information, the final amount would be 276,558.75, and then for this first half, our starting amount was X, 1 plus our interest rate was 12% per annum compounded monthly, so I would be 12 over 100, which would give me 0.12, and then that means your I for monthly would just be 0.12 divided by 12. So we can substitute that in, and this original X amount was invested for 3 years, so it's 3 times 12 because it's compounded monthly. And then for the final part, we started with 2X, then 1 plus the interest remained the same, so it's 0.12 over 12. And in this case, this second amount, the 2X, was only invested for 4 years. So that would give me 4 times 12, and then we can simplify a little bit. So 1 plus 0.12, 12, 3 times, no, this would not be a 3, this should be a 7 because it was invested for a total of 7 years. Apologies. 7 times 12 which is then equal to 84 plus 2x times 1 plus 0, 2, 12 times, and the 4 times 12 gives me 48. Now from there we now need to try and solve this, but it looks a little bit more complicated than it actually is because of the whole two separate terms situation. Now what we essentially can do is we know that these x's are common, so we can factor them out. So we essentially have x times 1 plus 0.12 over 12 to the power of 84 plus 2 times 1 plus 0.12 over 12 times 48. And then from there we can, well, there's no x's involved in this part, so we can just simplify them or add it together, and then we should get x times 5.531174,899, and that should still be equal to the 276,558.75. From there we divide on both sides with the 5.531174,899 to get the value of x. And therefore x would then just be equal to 50,001 cents. Okay, so in this case you just needed to put your timeline together and then sort it out from there on. Okay, so the next question comes from the term 3 test that you guys wrote, and it says a recording studio purchased new sound equipment of 540,000, and the value of this equipment is expected to depreciate on reducing balance per annum to 203,000 in 3 years. The price of the new equipment will increase by 12% per annum. Calculate the, now before we get to the question, what the background information tells us that this equipment, if we buy it now, is worth 540,000. But if we buy it now and over 3 years time, then it will be worth 203,000. Okay, but 3 years from now, if we want to buy the same equipment that was 540,000 Rand worth now, because of interest, this 540,000 would have had a new price increase by 12% per annum. So if I buy this equipment brand new now, it would be 540,000. But if I want to buy it, say 3 years in the future, I'm going to have to add 12% for every year that passed. Okay, and then second-hand equipment would cost me 203,000, or would be worth 203,000. Now they ask you, okay, first calculate the annual rate of depreciation of this equipment. Now we know that this equipment, if we buy it brand new now, would be 540,000 Rand worth. Okay, if this in 3 years time would then only be 203,000 Rand worth. We know that this is in 3 years time, and our I value, that is what we want to calculate. This is the big question that they're asking. So because they say reducing balance method, we use the reducing balanced depreciation formula, which is basically your compound interest formula, but instead of a plus we have a minus. From there we can insert all of our information. So the A value would be 203,000, the P value would be 540,000, and your I value would be, well, that's what we want to calculate, and our N value would be 3. From there we can divide on both sides with 540,000 to try and get the I minus 1 minus I to the power of 3 alone, and we're left with 203 over 540 being equal to 1 minus I to the power of 3. From there we can then take this cube root on both sides, so that we can get rid of this 3, or to the power of 3, and then from there we know that the cube root of 203 over 540 will be equal to 1 minus I. From there we can now just try to solve for I normally. So we want to isolate the I, get it alone. So minus I throw the 1 over, it becomes a negative. So the cube root of 203 over 540 minus 1 is equal to negative I. Now if I type this into my calculator, it gives me an answer of minus 0.2782821,843, which is equal to negative I, but I don't want to know what negative I is. I want to find I, so I divide with negative on both sides. So I is 0.2782821,843. And what's important now is that I, or well, to get I take my interest rate and I divide it with 100. So to get my interest rate, or to do the reverse, I need to multiply with 100 on both sides, and therefore I would then simply just be 27.83%. Then the next question now asks you, okay, recording, I'm giving you the background information there again, and now they want to know, if you were to buy this equipment brand new 3 years from now, what would you pay then? Now in this case, we will have to use the compound interest formula, because remember, this year the price will increase. Next year the new price will also increase with 12%. So the new value of the equipment, or the interest that was added to the equipment, will also then gain interest, and then therefore we will have to use the compound interest formula. Now in this case, the new equipment that we want, if we buy it now, the value would be 540,000. My interest rate in this case, remember, this is now not the interest rate at which it depreciates, it is the rate at which the equipment gains value if you want to buy it brand new, which in this case would be 12% per annum. So it would be 12 divided by 100, which would give us 0.12. And this will also be in the account for 3 years, or you'd have to calculate how much this new equipment is worth in 3 years. So from there we can substitute in these values that we have, and then simply type it in onto calculator, and you will know that this equipment, if we were to buy it brand new in 3 years time, we would need to have 661 rand and 12 cents. Now the next question asks you, okay, calculate the value of the sinking fund that needs to be set up to pay for a new equipment if the proceeds from selling the old equipment is used towards the new equipment. So essentially what they're asking you is, how much do you need to save up to buy new equipment in 3 years time, okay, if you are able to sell the old equipment and use that money to help pay for the new equipment. So that would mean the value of the sinking fund would have to be equal to the total that needs to be saved up, so 758,661.12 minus how much you get from selling the old equipment, so which would be the 203,000. So therefore you would only need to save up 555,661 rand and 12 cents to buy this new equipment in 3 years' time. Now they ask you, okay, now they're telling you, okay, you open the account, you know now how much you have to save in these 3 years to buy the new equipment. Now, calculate how much rand you would have to put away every month or every so often to be able to have saved up this amount. So they ask you, okay, calculate the half-yearly payments that must be made into the sinking fund if the interest rate is 10.5% per annum compounded half-yearly. Now we know in this case, we want to know the worth of an account in the future. So we will have to use the future value annuity formula or the annuity formula or the future value formula, which is 1 or x f is equal to x, open bracket, open another bracket, 1 plus I to the power of n minus 1 over I. Again, we use this formula because we know what the account will be worth in the future, and we want to know how much we have to save up every half year to get to that amount at the end of the 3 years. So we know that our final amount, the money that we want to save up to, is going to be the value of the sinking fund, which would be 5,055 or 555,661 rand and 12 cents. We also know that it's going to have to be saved for 3 years, but we're making half yearly payments, so we have to multiply our time span or our period with 2, okay, which would give me 6 in this case, and then my I value for a year value or for yearly would be 10.5 divided by 100, which would give me approximately 0.105. And then for a half yearly interest rate, I would just need to take this 0.15 and divide it by 2, which would give me a nice decimal of 0.05225 to work with. From there, now I have almost all the values that I need except for the x, so I can substitute it into my future value formula. So F is the 555,000, X is what I want to calculate, my I is the 0.0525, my N value is 6, minus 1 over, then this is going to be 0.0525, and now I need to start solving for X. So the first thing I want to do is get rid of this denominator. So to do that, I multiply on both sides with 0.0525, and that would just end up giving me, on this side, it would give me 29,172 and 2,080 or 2088 cents, which is then equal to X. And I can then type all of this that was in brackets here, and that would give me 0.3593541,802. Divide on both sides with this amount. Oh, technical difficulties, there we go. 0.3593541,802. Remember to only round off at the end, or else your answers become more inaccurate. So therefore X would have to be 81,179,154 cents. So they would have to put away 81,179 rand and 54 cents every half a year for 3 years to save up to 555,661 cents, or 661 rand and 12 cents. to be able to buy the new equipment if they can also sell the old equipment. Now, ladies and gents, that then brings us to the end. And remember, nothing will work unless you do. We can't expect to have an achievement or get somewhere in life if we're not willing to work for it ourselves.